The Hello Kitty murder. The 1999 Hello Kitty murder is one of the most disturbing crimes in Hong Kong's history, a case so horrific that it remains infamous decades later. The brutality inflicted on the victim, 23-year-old Fan Man-yi, shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The details of her captivity, torture, and eventual murder revealed a level of sadism that seemed almost unreal, made even more chilling by the bizarre discovery that gave the case its name. Fan Man-yi had a troubled past. She grew up in difficult circumstances, spending part of her youth in an orphanage before falling into a life of hardship. She became involved in drugs and eventually turned to sex work to survive. At some point, she crossed paths with a man named Chan Manlok, a 34-year-old triad member with a history of violence. Fan reportedly made a mistake that would seal her fate. She stole money from Chan, a decision that would lead to unimaginable suffering. In March 1999, Fan was abducted by Chan and two of his associates, Leung Xingqiu and Leung Wailuan. They took her to an apartment in Kowloon, where she was held captive. What followed was a month of relentless torture. She was beaten daily, burned with cigarette butts, and subjected to extreme physical abuse. The men took pleasure in her suffering, laughing as they tormented her. Even more horrifying, Chan's teenage girlfriend, only 14 years old at the time, also participated in the abuse. The torture escalated. The captors melted plastic straws and dripped the burning liquid onto her body. They forced her to consume human waste. They beat her with metal pipes and kicked her for amusement. As the days went by, her injuries worsened, and she became too weak to even beg for mercy. Eventually, she succumbed to her wounds. When Fan died, her killers didn't panic. Instead, they dismembered her body and disposed of it in the most disturbing way possible. They boiled her remains, likely in an attempt to get rid of evidence. Her skull was stuffed inside a giant Hello Kitty mermaid plush toy. It was this grim detail that gave the case its nickname, the Hello Kitty murder. The crime might have remained undiscovered if not for the conscience of a young girl. Chan's teenage girlfriend, who had been forced to participate in the abuse, eventually went to the police. She claimed she was being haunted by Fan's ghost and couldn't keep the secret any longer. Investigators were skeptical, but when they searched the apartment, they found the grotesque evidence. Fan's skull hidden inside the Hello Kitty doll, along with some of her internal organs stored in the refrigerator. The trial that followed shocked Hong Kong. The brutality of the crime was incomprehensible. However, because there was no way to determine the exact cause of death, since Fan's body had been mutilated beyond recognition, the defendants were convicted of manslaughter instead of murder. They received life sentences with the possibility of parole after 20 years. The Hello Kitty murder remains one of the most infamous crimes in Hong Kong's history. It is a case that lingers in the public's memory, a haunting reminder of just how cruel human beings can be. Fan Man-yi's suffering was incomprehensible, and though justice was served in some form, the horror of what happened to her can never truly be erased. The murder of Sherri Rasmussen. Sherri Rasmussen was a bright, driven woman who seemed to have everything going for her. She was born in 1957, an exceptional student who earned her nursing degree at just 20 years old. By her late 20s, she had already risen to become the director of critical care at Glendale Adventist Medical Center in Los Angeles. She was intelligent, compassionate, and deeply respected in her field. In 1985, she married John Rutan, a young engineer she had fallen in love with. Together, they built what seemed to be a promising future. But beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, trouble was brewing. Someone was watching Sherri, following her, and making her feel uneasy. That someone was Stephanie Lazarus, an LAPD officer with a history that was deeply entangled with John's. Stephanie had dated John on and off during college, but it had never been serious for him. He moved on, but Stephanie never seemed to fully accept it. She remained fixated on John, and when he became engaged to Sherri, her obsession only grew stronger. Sherri confided in her parents that she felt threatened. She told them about Stephanie's behavior, how she had shown up at her workplace unannounced, making comments about her relationship with John. Sherri was unsettled but tried to move on with her life. On the morning of February 24, 1986, John left their Van Nuys condo early for work, while Sherri, feeling slightly ill, decided to stay home. When John returned that evening, he walked into a nightmare. The living room was in chaos. Broken glass, furniture overturned, and blood smeared across the floor. And there, in the middle of it, was Sherri's body. She had been shot 3 times in the chest at close range. A heavy porcelain vase had been shattered over her head, and defensive wounds showed she had fought back fiercely. Police initially believed the crime was a burglary gone wrong. The condo showed signs of forced entry, and a few items were missing, including the couple's marriage license and a VCR. But there were inconsistencies. High-value items like expensive electronics had been left behind. The level of violence seemed excessive for a typical home invasion. Despite these red flags, investigators quickly closed the case. Sherri's parents were unconvinced. They insisted their daughter had feared someone specific, Stephanie Lazarus. They even gave police her name, but their concerns were brushed aside. The idea that a fellow officer could be involved in a brutal murder was unthinkable. The case went cold, and for more than 2 decades, the truth remained buried. But in 2009, advances in forensic technology breathed new life into the investigation. Detectives revisiting the case took another look at a critical piece of evidence: a bite mark on Sherri's arm. Back in 1986, a saliva sample had been collected from the wound, but DNA testing wasn't yet available. Now it was. When tested, the DNA revealed something startling. The attacker was a woman. That fact alone shattered the burglary theory. Female burglars, especially violent ones, were exceedingly rare. Investigators started looking at the case from a fresh perspective, and Lazarus's name resurfaced. She had been mentioned in the original case file but never seriously considered. Detectives needed confirmation. They discreetly followed Lazarus, waiting for an opportunity to collect her DNA. Eventually, she discarded a cup, and when tested, it was a perfect match. The case that had gone unsolved for 23 years had found its suspect. In June 2009, Stephanie Lazarus was arrested. The revelation sent shockwaves through the LAPD. She had built a career within the force, even working in the art theft division, all while harboring a horrifying secret. During the trial, prosecutors painted a chilling picture of Lazarus's obsession. She had never let go of John, and when he chose Sherri, she snapped. In a fit of jealousy and rage, she had entered the condo that morning and confronted Sherri. A struggle ensued, culminating in a brutal attack. The staged burglary was an attempt to cover up her crime. The defense argued that the case was built on circumstantial evidence. But the DNA didn't lie. The jury found her guilty of first-degree murder. In 2012, she was sentenced to 27 years to life in prison. For Sherri's family, justice had come far too late, but it had finally come. The case remains a haunting reminder of how power and privilege can shield someone from suspicion. It also stands as a testament to the persistence of those who refused to let Sherri be forgotten. The brutal loss, the years of unanswered questions, and the obsession that fueled it all. This was not just a crime but a tragedy that echoed for decades. Charles C. Morgan. Charles C. Morgan's death remains one of the most perplexing unsolved mysteries in modern history. A case filled with cryptic clues, secret identities, and possible connections to organized crime and government conspiracies. His life ended under bizarre and disturbing circumstances in 1977. Leaving behind more questions than answers. Morgan was a 39-year-old escrow agent in Tucson, Arizona. He lived a seemingly normal life with his wife, Ruth, and their children. However, his work in real estate wasn't as ordinary as it seemed. He handled large financial transactions, some of which involved organized crime, money laundering, and covert government dealings. He had access to sensitive financial records, and this may have played a role in his sudden and mysterious disappearance. On March 22, 1977, Morgan vanished without a trace. His family panicked, but law enforcement had no leads. Then, 3 days later, he stumbled back into their home, disoriented and unable to speak. He was wearing the same clothes he had on when he disappeared, but something was different. His hands were bound with plastic cuffs, and he had a strange mark on his throat. He finally managed to communicate by writing notes to his wife, telling her that he had been kidnapped and tortured. He claimed someone had put a hallucinogenic drug on his throat, which prevented him from speaking. Morgan insisted he couldn't go to the police because it would put their family in danger. He also revealed that he had been working as a secret agent for the U.S. Treasury Department, allegedly helping them investigate money laundering schemes. There was no official confirmation of this, but Morgan seemed genuinely terrified. He started behaving as if someone was watching him. He wore a bulletproof vest, refused to let his daughters turn on the lights at night, and spoke of people who wanted him dead. 2 months later, on June 18, 1977, his fears became reality. Morgan's body was found 40 miles from Tucson in the desert. He had been shot in the back of the head with his own .357 Magnum revolver, yet the gun was found beside his body, leading to suspicions that he hadn't shot himself. He was wearing his bulletproof vest, and inside his car, police found a baffling collection of clues. Tucked into Morgan's waistband was a $2 bill. On it, he had written 7 Spanish names from the Book of Ecclesiastes, a series of biblical references, and a crude map leading to a Mexican town known for its connections to drug smuggling. The bill also had the words Ecclesiastes 12 written on it, a passage that speaks about life and death. Additionally, his car contained ammunition, a pair of sunglasses that didn't belong to him, and a strange collection of documents that made little sense. Despite all these anomalies, authorities ruled Morgan's death a suicide. The conclusion baffled his family, who insisted he would never have taken his own life, especially in such a manner. The presence of multiple gunshots and the cryptic evidence suggested something far more sinister. The mystery deepened when an unknown woman called the local newspaper after his death. She claimed her name was Green Eyes and that Morgan had been killed because he was about to expose a criminal operation. She also said he had met with an FBI agent shortly before his death. This raised further suspicions that Morgan was involved in something dangerous. Perhaps he was caught between the mafia and the government, both of whom wanted him silenced. No one has ever been able to fully explain the circumstances of Charles C. Morgan's death. Theories range from mafia assassination to secret government involvement, but no definitive answers have ever surfaced. The case remains open, a haunting story of a man who may have known too much and paid the ultimate price. The death of Kasia Lenhardt. Kasia Lenhardt's story is one of beauty, ambition, love, and ultimately, tragedy. Her life was a series of moments filled with promise, captured in the flashes of cameras and the glow of social media screens. From a young age, she was someone people noticed, not just for her striking features but for an energy that seemed to radiate from within. She had the kind of beauty that turned heads effortlessly, the kind that made people assume life must be easy. But beauty is never armor. She stepped into the public eye through Germany's Next Top Model, a reality show that had given many young women their start in the fashion world. She had the qualities that made for a compelling contestant: a striking look, a fierce confidence, and a sense of style that felt effortless. Even though she didn't win, she made an impression. Fashion, social media, and public attention followed her. It seemed like her path was set, one that so many others longed for: the curated, shimmering world of modeling and influence. Behind the filtered images, the brand partnerships, the invitations to exclusive events, there was another side of Kasia's life. The reality of being in the public eye is often far removed from the illusion it projects. Scrutiny becomes relentless, and the more people watch, the more they feel entitled to judge. Every photo is picked apart, every relationship dissected. And when fame intersects with personal struggles, it can become suffocating. Her relationship with footballer Jerome Boateng was the kind that made headlines. When a model and an athlete are together, the public wants to see the fairy tale. The glamorous vacations, the high-end gifts, the red carpet appearances. But relationships are never as simple as the images that make it to Instagram. They exist in private conversations, in the silences that aren't shared, in the moments of doubt that never get posted. Kasia and Jerome's relationship was no different. When it ended, it didn't just dissolve quietly in the way normal relationships do. It unraveled in a public, brutal way. Accusations, statements, counterstatements. What should have been personal pain turned into a spectacle. And as always, when a relationship fails under public scrutiny, opinions form quickly. Strangers take sides. Speculation fuels the flames. For Kasia, it became overwhelming. The pressure, the betrayal, the whispers and headlines that seemed to follow her every move. Even when a person is strong, even when they've built a life in front of cameras, the weight of constant judgment is immense. The internet doesn't allow people to grieve privately, doesn't give them space to breathe. On February 9, 2021, Kasia was found in an apartment in Berlin. She was 25 years old. The news spread quickly, as it always does. A name, a face, a headline. The world moves on, but the people who knew her, who loved her, don't. There are always the inevitable questions. Could something have been done? Could someone have said the right thing at the right time? Could the world have been kinder? In the wake of her passing, people spoke about mental health, about the pressures of fame, about the way society builds people up only to tear them down when they are most vulnerable. And yet, these conversations come too late for those who have already fallen. Her story isn't just about tragedy. It's about the hidden weight people carry, the silent battles they fight behind perfect pictures and polished captions. It's a reminder that no one is immune to pain, no matter how bright their world may seem from the outside. And maybe, in remembering her, there's a chance to be gentler with others, to choose kindness over judgment, to look beyond the surface. Because sometimes, behind the most dazzling smiles, there is a world of hurt unseen. The boy in the chimney case. The case of the boy in the chimney is one of those haunting mysteries that lingers in the mind long after the headlines have faded. It's the kind of story that leaves more questions than answers, a tragic event wrapped in confusion and speculation. It revolves around the disappearance and death of Joshua Maddox, a bright, free-spirited 18-year-old from Woodland Park, Colorado. He was the kind of teenager who seemed to embody the adventurous spirit, kind, creative, full of life. He loved music, played the guitar, and dreamed of writing. But in 2008, his story took a dark and perplexing turn. One day in May, Joshua left home, telling his family he was just going for a walk. It was something he often did, nothing out of the ordinary. But this time, he didn't come back. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. There were no immediate leads, no sightings, no explanation. He had simply vanished. For years, his family searched, clinging to the hope that maybe he had left town. Maybe he had started a new life somewhere far away. After all, he had spoken before about the idea of setting out on an adventure going to California. But the lack of any sign of him was crushing. There was no evidence, no trail to follow, just silence. It wasn't until 2015, 7 years later, that the mystery of Joshua Maddox's disappearance took a disturbing turn. During the demolition of an abandoned cabin less than a mile from his home, a shocking discovery was made. His body, lodged inside the chimney. The state of the remains suggested he had been there for a long time. Theories immediately started to swirl. How had he ended up in such a bizarre and chilling position? What had led him to that cabin? And, most importantly, was this an accident or something more sinister? The initial theory was that Joshua had climbed into the chimney from the top, possibly attempting to enter the cabin. But as investigators examined the scene, troubling details emerged. His body was in a fetal position, facing downward, as if he had been stuck there for a prolonged time. There were no signs of struggle, no broken bones, nothing to suggest he had fallen in from above. Adding to the mystery, a heavy metal grate had been installed at the top of the chimney, making it almost impossible for him to have entered that way. Another disturbing detail was that his clothes were found inside the cabin, folded neatly near the fireplace. If he had willingly climbed into the chimney, why would his clothes be inside the house? And why was there no evidence of him attempting to free himself? Despite these inconsistencies, the official cause of death was ruled as accidental, citing probable asphyxiation or hypothermia. The idea was that he had voluntarily entered the chimney, either as a prank or an attempt to gain entry into the house, and had become trapped. But for many, this explanation didn't sit right. There were whispers of foul play, theories of someone forcing him into the chimney, perhaps a struggle that had ended in his death. Some speculated about an encounter gone wrong, while others believed he had been hidden there intentionally. The presence of his clothing inside the cabin only deepened the mystery. Who had placed them there, and why? Joshua's case remains one of those eerie, unsolved mysteries that defies logical explanation. There are no clear answers, only unsettling possibilities. His family, left without closure, can only speculate about what truly happened in that abandoned cabin. It's a chilling reminder of how some stories never get the resolution they deserve. A young life, full of promise, lost in circumstances that may never be fully understood. And so, the legend of the boy in the chimney endures, a tragic, unsettling puzzle that continues to haunt those who hear it. The eerie disappearance of Paul Fugate. Paul Fugate's disappearance is one of those eerie, unsolved cases that lingers like a shadow, leaving behind questions that may never have answers. It's the kind of mystery that gnaws at those who hear it, not because of any obvious foul play or dramatic confrontation, but because it happened in broad daylight, in a place where people come to find peace, not vanish. Fugate was a National Park Service ranger, a man who had dedicated his life to the wild beauty of the Chiricahua National Monument in Arizona. By all accounts, he loved his job. The rugged landscape of towering rock formations, ancient volcanic spires, and hidden canyons was his office, and he knew it intimately. He was the type of person you'd expect to be completely at home in the wilderness, capable, experienced, someone who wouldn't simply get lost. But on the afternoon of January 13, 1980, something strange happened. Paul Fugate walked out of the visitor center for what should have been a routine patrol. It was just after 2 p.m. when he told a seasonal employee that he was going to check the trails and would be back soon. Then he stepped outside, into the quiet expanse of the monument, and was never seen again. Hours passed. When he didn't return, concern grew. The employee who had been at the visitor center began to worry. By evening, a search was underway. The National Park Service, local law enforcement, and volunteers scoured the park. They found no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading to a clue, no personal belongings left behind. It was as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Days turned into weeks. The search expanded, but still nothing surfaced. No clothing, no radio, no evidence that could point to where he had gone or what had happened to him. The land was rugged, but it wasn't endless. If he had gotten lost or injured, there should have been some trace. But there was none. Theories began to form, each one as troubling as the next. Did he simply get lost? Unlikely, given his deep knowledge of the area. Was he attacked by an animal? Again, improbable. There were no signs of such an incident, and a large predator would have left some kind of evidence. Could he have staged his own disappearance? His loved ones doubted it. There was no clear reason why he would suddenly abandon his life, his career, and the people who cared about him. Then came a more chilling possibility. foul play. Some believed Fugate may have come across something or someone he wasn't supposed to. There were murmurs about illegal activities in the remote areas of the park, possibly drug trafficking. In the 1980s, parts of Arizona were becoming known for smuggling routes, and national parks provided convenient cover for those who didn't want to be seen. Could Paul have encountered the wrong people at the wrong time? Could he have been silenced because he knew too much? The investigation led to strange dead ends. A reward was posted, but no credible leads surfaced. Even more unsettling, there were allegations that the National Park Service didn't initially classify Fugate as a missing person, complicating the early search efforts. Some reports suggested that officials considered the idea that he had voluntarily disappeared, which delayed crucial investigation time. If foul play was involved, those lost hours and days may have been critical in finding him or those responsible. As time passed, another question began to surface. If Paul Fugate had been murdered, where was his body? The Chiricahua National Monument covers around 12,000 acres. Vast, but not infinite. If someone had wanted to hide a body, they would have had to find a place where it would never be discovered. The landscape is full of caves, cliffs, and dense forest, but 7 years of searches turned up nothing. Years passed and the case grew colder. Paul Fugate's absence left a void in those who knew him. His wife never stopped searching for answers, never stopped hoping for some kind of closure. She fought to keep his case in the public eye, but with no new leads, no developments, it felt like shouting into the void. Time continued to move forward, and with each year, the likelihood of solving the mystery seemed to slip further away. Even decades later, the case remains officially open, with the National Park Service offering a reward of $60,000 for information. But the questions that haunted investigators in 1980 still remain today. What happened to Paul Fugate? Was he the victim of a random act of violence, or did someone plan to make him disappear? Did he witness something that sealed his fate? Or is there another explanation that no one has yet considered? His disappearance remains one of those haunting, unexplained events that defy logic. It's not just that he vanished. It's where he vanished, how suddenly, and with no trace left behind. In a world where most mysteries eventually reveal their secrets, this one remains stubbornly unsolved. The Mcstay family massacre. The disappearance and murder of the Mcstay family remains one of the most chilling and perplexing true crime cases in recent history. What began as a baffling missing persons case, an entire family vanishing from their suburban California home, ended with a horrifying discovery in the Mojave Desert, revealing a brutal fate that no one could have imagined. Joseph Mcstay, 40, his wife Summer, 43, and their 2 young sons, Johnny, 4, and Joseph Jr., 3, lived in Fallbrook, California, a quiet town north of San Diego. Joseph ran a successful business designing and installing decorative water fountains, and Summer focused on raising their children. By all appearances, they had a stable, happy life. But everything changed on February 4, 2010. That evening, Joseph had a routine phone call with a business associate around 5:45 p.m. Soon after, the family's car, an Isuzu Trooper, was seen leaving their driveway. That was the last known sighting of the Mcstay family. Days passed, and no one heard from them. Family members grew concerned as phone calls and emails went unanswered. On February 10th, Joseph's brother, Michael Mcstay, went to their home to check on them. What he found was unsettling. Inside, the house seemed eerily normal. A carton of eggs was left out on the counter. Bowls of popcorn sat on the couch, as if the family had been in the middle of a movie night. Their 2 dogs had been left outside without food or water, something completely out of character for Summer, who adored them. But the most troubling sign was that the family's car was missing. Days later, the Isuzu Trooper was found abandoned near the San Isidro border crossing into Mexico. Surveillance footage from the crossing showed a family of 4, resembling the Mcstays, walking into Mexico. Had they left voluntarily? Investigators initially believed so. The working theory was that the Mcstays had chosen to start a new life in Mexico, possibly to escape financial troubles or personal issues. But something didn't add up. Their bank accounts remained untouched. Their passports were left behind. They had made no withdrawals, no signs of preparing for a sudden move. More than anything, those who knew them insisted that Summer would never have left their dogs behind. For 3 years, their disappearance remained a mystery. Theories swirled. Had they fled voluntarily? Had they been kidnapped? Had something gone terribly wrong in Mexico? With no new leads, the case seemed to stall. Then, in November 2013, a grim discovery shattered the idea that they had vanished by choice. A motorcyclist riding through a remote desert area in Victorville, California, came across human remains. Authorities arrived and found 2 shallow graves containing the bodies of all 4 Mcstay family members. They had been brutally murdered, beaten to death with a sledgehammer. Suddenly, everything changed. This was no voluntary disappearance. This was a massacre. The focus shifted from why they had left to who had killed them, and why. Investigators began looking into those closest to Joseph, especially his business associate, Charles Chase Merritt. Merritt had been one of the last people to see Joseph alive. He had worked with him on his water fountain business and had financial ties to him. The deeper police looked, the more troubling details they uncovered. Merritt had been forging checks in Joseph's name and cashing them after the family had disappeared. He had also deleted emails and attempted to erase business records. Most damning of all, forensic evidence placed him at the burial site in the desert. Authorities believe Merritt lured Joseph into a meeting, killed him, and then went to the house to murder Summer and the children, eliminating all witnesses. The crime was brutal, calculated, and driven by greed. Merritt owed Joseph tens of thousands of dollars and knew he was in trouble. In 2014, Merritt was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder. His trial was long and complex, lasting nearly 5 years. Prosecutors argued that his financial desperation led him to slaughter his own friend and his family in cold blood. The defense countered that the evidence was circumstantial and that authorities had rushed to judgment. But in 2019, a jury found Charles Merritt guilty of the Mcstay family murders. He was sentenced to death. Even with a conviction, haunting questions remain. How could someone so close to the family betray them so cruelly? How could he murder not just Joseph but Summer and 2 innocent children? And why did it take so long for the truth to come to light? The Mcstay case is a reminder of how darkness can lurk in unexpected places. It's a case about betrayal, greed, and senseless violence. A happy family wiped out in the most savage way, their bodies discarded in the desert like an afterthought. The unexplained death of Henry Mccabe. Henry Mccabe's death is one of those unsettling mysteries that lingers, full of strange details that don't quite add up. A devoted husband, father, and respected auditor, he was a man with a stable life, a clear direction, and no known enemies. But in the early hours of September 7, 2015, he disappeared into the night under circumstances that only grew more disturbing as the case unfolded. His final moments, captured in a voicemail filled with unexplainable sounds, remain one of the most haunting pieces of evidence in modern unsolved cases. That night, Mccabe had gone out with friends in Spring Lake Park, Minnesota. It was a normal night, drinks, conversation, nothing out of the ordinary. He was with William Kennedy, a friend who would later become a key figure in the mystery. According to Kennedy, Mccabe had too much to drink, so he offered to give him a ride home. But instead of dropping him at his house, Kennedy later claimed he left Mccabe at a gas station, miles away from where he lived, at around 2 a.m. The reason for this decision was unclear, and Kennedy's account would later be questioned, as no footage or witnesses ever confirmed Mccabe's presence at the gas station that night. What happened next remains unknown, but at 2:28 a.m., McCabe's wife, Corrine, who was in California at the time, received a voicemail from his phone. The sounds on the recording were nothing short of terrifying. Unearthly growls, animalistic screeches, and distorted noises, as if McCabe was experiencing unbearable pain or fear. In between the chaos, his voice could be heard uttering two chilling words, "Stop it." Then the call went silent. The voicemail immediately sent alarm bells ringing. It didn't sound like an ordinary distress call, and it certainly didn't sound like something caused by mere intoxication. His wife, panicked and horrified, reported him missing, and soon after, the search for Henry McCabe began. At first, investigators focused on the usual possibilities. Maybe he had wandered off, maybe he had gotten lost, maybe something had gone wrong after he left the gas station. But there was no trace of him. Days passed with no new information, and every lead seemed to go nowhere. The gas station where Kennedy claimed to have dropped him off had no record of him being there. No one had seen him. His phone remained off. It was as if he had stepped out of the car and vanished into thin air. For nearly 2 months, there were no answers. Then, on November 2nd, 2015, a grim discovery was made. A kayaker on Rush Lake, about 6 miles from where McCabe was last seen, found a body floating in the water. It was McCabe. His death was ruled a drowning. No signs of foul play, no significant injuries. He was still wearing the same clothes he had on the night he disappeared. There was no indication that he had been attacked, and no clear explanation for how he ended up in the lake. But the problems with this conclusion were immediate. How had McCabe, in the middle of the night, while drunk, managed to walk 6 miles in near-freezing temperatures, with no phone, no money, and no apparent sense of direction? The terrain between his last known location and the lake wasn't easy. There were roads, obstacles, and stretches of unlit land. There were no reports of anyone seeing him. And then there was the voicemail. It didn't sound like the noises of a man stumbling or falling. It sounded like someone in unimaginable distress. Some even described the audio as sounding inhuman, as though he was being attacked by something beyond explanation. Different theories emerged, each one stranger than the last. The most conventional theory is that McCabe, disoriented and heavily intoxicated, wandered off and fell into the lake, leading to an accidental drowning. But that doesn't explain the voicemail. If he had simply gotten lost and panicked, why did his voice sound so tortured? And why were there no signs that he had struggled in the water? Another theory suggests foul play. Perhaps he had been lured somewhere, harmed, and later dumped in the lake. Some questioned whether his friend Kennedy knew more than he admitted, given the inconsistencies in his story. Others speculated that McCabe had encountered someone or something that night, something that led to his inexplicable terror. There are even those who believe the voicemail captures something paranormal or otherworldly. Some listeners describe the noises as mechanical, distorted in a way that doesn't sound like anything human or animal. Could he have experienced something beyond explanation? The idea remains in the realm of speculation, but it persists because nothing else seems to fully make sense. The bizarre fate of Roland T. Owen. The case of Roland T. Owen is one of the most chilling and bizarre mysteries in American crime history. A man who checked into a hotel under an alias, lived through several days of eerie and unexplained events, and was later found brutally murdered under circumstances that have never been fully understood. His true identity, the events leading up to his death, and the people involved remain an enigma nearly a century later. On January 2nd, 1935, a tall, well-dressed man arrived at the hotel president in Kansas City, Missouri. He checked in under the name Roland T. Owen and requested an interior room, one without a window. He carried no luggage, only a comb and a toothbrush. From the start, hotel employees found him unsettling. He avoided eye contact, spoke only when necessary, and appeared constantly tense, as though expecting something or someone. The first sign of strangeness came almost immediately. A maid, Mary Soptic, was assigned to clean his room that afternoon. When she arrived, she found Owen sitting in the dimly lit room, fully dressed in a suit and tie. The phone rang as she worked. He picked it up and, after a brief pause, said only 2 words, "No, Dawn." Then silence. It was an odd exchange, but she thought little of it at the time. Over the next 2 days, his behavior only grew more unnerving. The following morning, when Soptic returned, she found that the door was locked from the outside, suggesting that Owen had left. Yet, when she entered, he was inside, fully awake, sitting on the bed in the dark. He barely acknowledged her, saying only that she could clean around him. That same evening, a bellboy arrived to deliver fresh towels. When he knocked, a deep, unfamiliar voice from inside the room growled, "We don't need any." The voice was not Owen's. By January 4th, it was clear something was terribly wrong. At around 7 a.m., the hotel operator noticed that Owen's room phone had been left off the hook. A bellboy was sent to check. The door was locked from the inside. After knocking, he heard a faint voice say, "Come in," but the door wouldn't budge. Hours later, growing more concerned, hotel staff unlocked the door and entered. Inside, they were met with horror. Owen was on the floor, covered in blood. His wrists and ankles were tied with a cord. He had been brutally beaten, with a deep skull fracture, and he had been stabbed multiple times, including a deep wound near his heart. Blood covered the walls, the bed, and the bathroom. Strangely, despite his horrific injuries, Owen was still alive. When asked who had done this to him, he whispered a single word, "Nobody." He soon lost consciousness and died later at the hospital. Investigators quickly realized that nothing about this crime made sense. For one, the crime scene was almost entirely empty. There was no wallet, no clothing, no luggage, nothing that indicated someone had been staying there. The only objects left behind were a tie label, an unlit cigarette, a hairpin, and a bottle of diluted sulfuric acid. Most baffling of all, there was a small note on the bedside table that read, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait. Asterisk." The hotel register was checked for more clues, but no one named Roland T. Owen existed. The name was fake. There was also no sign of forced entry. Whoever had attacked him had either been let in willingly or had already been inside. As police tried to piece together the case, new details emerged. A hotel guest reported hearing what sounded like arguing in the room during the night, followed by a loud thud. But by the time staff checked in the morning, Owen had been too weak to explain what had happened. A few days after the murder, an anonymous woman called a local funeral home, saying she wanted to cover Owen's burial expenses. She refused to give her name but said he had been involved in a love triangle. Later, an unknown donor sent money for his funeral, along with a bouquet of roses and a note that read, "Love forever, Louise." New theories spread like wildfire. Some believed Owen had been caught in a deadly love affair, with Dawn being either a jealous lover or a romantic rival. Others suspected he had ties to organized crime, perhaps a hit for some unknown betrayal. Another theory suggested he had been a drifter in the wrong place at the wrong time. Months later, the case took an even stranger turn. A Kansas City newspaper ran a story about the murder, and an anonymous caller phoned the newsroom. "You have it all wrong," the voice said. "He didn't die the way you think he did." Then the line went dead. In 1936, over a year after the murder, a woman named Ruby Ogletree read about the case and recognized the man's photo. She came forward, claiming the victim was Artemis Ogletree, her 17-year-old son, who had left home to travel. The body was exhumed, and dental records confirmed the match. This revelation only deepened the mystery. Ruby Ogletree had received letters from her son after his supposed death. They were typed, but Artemis had never used a typewriter. Someone had been writing to her, pretending he was still alive. Who had sent those letters? Who had killed him? And who was Dawn? Despite decades of speculation, the answers have never surfaced. The case of Roland T. Owen, later revealed as Artemis Ogletree, remains an unsolved enigma. A man with no past, a murder with no motive, and a trail that leads only to silence. The curious death of Rey Rivera. Rey Rivera was a man full of dreams, ambition, and a deep sense of curiosity. He was a writer, a filmmaker, and someone who constantly sought meaning in life. He had recently moved to Baltimore with his wife, Allison, to start anew, accepting a job with his longtime friend Porter Stansberry's financial newsletter company. To most who knew him, Rey was intelligent, creative, and loving, someone who had everything to live for. But then, on May 16, 2006, he vanished without a trace. For days, there was no sign of him. His family and friends scoured the city, searching for any clue that might explain his disappearance. His wife, desperate for answers, found his car parked in a lot near the historic Belvedere Hotel. Something about its location didn't make sense. Rey had no known reason to be there. As she and the search team pressed on, the mystery deepened. Then a grim discovery was made. Inside a conference room annex of the Belvedere Hotel, workers noticed a hole in the roof. When investigators checked inside, they found Rey's body. He had apparently fallen from an extreme height, crashing through the building structure and landing in an area rarely accessed. But how he got there, why he was there in the first place, and what led to his fatal plunge remained a perplexing enigma. From the beginning, nothing about Rey's death fit into a neat explanation. The position of his body, the injuries he sustained, and even the trajectory of his fall all raised more questions than answers. The hotel's rooftop was difficult to access. To reach it, he would have had to navigate through multiple secure doors or take a running leap from an adjacent ledge. Yet, there was no clear evidence showing how he could have done either. If he jumped, why? If he fell, how? If he was pushed, by whom? Adding to the mystery was the note found taped behind Rey's computer at home. It was an odd, cryptic message referencing movies, famous figures, Freemasonry, and financial matters. It named people both living and dead and had an almost coded quality to it. Some thought it suggested mental distress, while others believed it pointed to something far more sinister. The police leaned toward the idea that Rey had taken his own life. They cited the strange note and financial pressures as possible motives. But his family refused to accept this conclusion. They knew Rey as an optimistic, driven individual who had been making exciting plans for the future. He had just bought plane tickets for an upcoming trip. He was still working on projects he was passionate about. And most of all, there was no known history of severe depression or mental illness that could explain such an act. His friend and employer, Porter Stansberry, remained curiously distant throughout the investigation. His company quickly shut down access to Rey's work emails, and employees were reportedly instructed not to speak about the case. This only fueled speculation that Rey had uncovered something at work, something dangerous enough to get him silenced. Then there was the physics of the fall. Experts questioned whether Rey could have realistically jumped from the hotel's upper levels and landed where he did. The distance was extreme, and the angle suggested an almost unnatural trajectory. The coroner's report was inconclusive, stating his cause of death was undetermined. The injuries were severe but not necessarily consistent with a straightforward fall. His phone and glasses were found nearby, seemingly undamaged, an odd detail considering the force with which he had fallen. Theories began swirling. Some believed he had been lured to the Belvedere and thrown from a helicopter. Others suspected he had been murdered by powerful individuals he had crossed paths with. There were whispers of secret societies, corporate conspiracies, and hidden truths that would never be uncovered. And yet, there were also those who argued that Rey had been struggling internally, that the pressures of life had weighed on him in ways no one could see. The case remains unresolved. To this day, the death of Rey Rivera stands as one of the most perplexing mysteries in modern true crime. His family continues to seek answers, believing that someone, somewhere, knows the truth. But for now, all that remains are the unanswered questions, the eerie circumstances, and the nagging feeling that something about Rey's final moments doesn't add up. Perhaps the truth lies in the details that were overlooked, in the subtle clues hidden in plain sight. Or maybe, like so many unsolved cases, it will remain an enigma, a puzzle with missing pieces, forever unsolved. The cryptic case of Ricky McCormick's coded notes. Ricky McCormick was an unassuming man, living a quiet life on the fringes of society. He had no high-profile connections, no significant enemies, and no apparent reason to be the center of a decades-long mystery. Yet, on June 30, 1999, his body was discovered in a cornfield in rural Missouri under circumstances that defied explanation. He had been missing for 3 days, and his remains were found far from any known place he frequented. There were no obvious signs of trauma, no apparent cause of death. But the real mystery wasn't just how he died. It was what was found in his pockets. 2 pieces of paper, covered in an indecipherable code, were retrieved from Ricky's pants. The notes were filled with a jumble of letters, numbers, and symbols, arranged in a way that made no immediate sense. Investigators were baffled. Was this a personal shorthand? A secret message? A cryptographic puzzle? No one could say for certain. For more than a decade, the FBI held on to the notes, attempting to crack the code with no success. It wasn't until 2011 that they were made public, with the hope that someone, an amateur codebreaker, a linguist, or even a member of Ricky's past, might recognize the pattern and reveal its meaning. But instead of answers, the notes only generated more questions. Ricky McCormick was not, by most accounts, an educated man. He had dropped out of school young, struggled with literacy, and lived a transient lifestyle. He worked odd jobs and spent time in and out of trouble, though nothing in his background suggested involvement in espionage or secret communication networks. And yet, these notes hinted at something beyond ordinary. Theories exploded. Some believed Ricky had been a low-level courier for a drug operation, using the coded notes as a way to keep track of deals or locations. Others speculated that he had stumbled upon something he wasn't supposed to know, perhaps witnessing a crime or being given a message too dangerous to carry in plain text. There were even those who thought the notes weren't meant to be understood at all, that they were simply the scribblings of a man with an overactive mind, creating patterns that held meaning only to him. But then, there were the unsettling details about his death. Ricky's body was found in an area he had no known reason to be in. He didn't own a car, and no public transportation reached that far into the rural landscape. His family insisted he could not have walked that distance on his own. Someone they believed had put him there. The condition of his remains also raised concerns. Though official reports suggested no foul play, many questioned whether a deeper investigation should have been conducted. If Ricky had been murdered, how had the killer managed to leave behind no trace? And why would they leave him with the coded notes intact? As time passed, the FBI acknowledged that the notes remained one of their top unsolved ciphers. They were classified as an open case, with experts and amateurs alike continuing to pore over the symbols, hoping for a breakthrough. Some saw repeating patterns, others detected possible references to locations or dates, but no one could crack the full message. The case remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern cryptography. Was Ricky McCormick carrying a message that could unlock the truth about his death? Or was it something more personal, his own form of expression, misunderstood by the world around him? For now, the notes sit in the archives of unsolved crimes, a tantalizing riddle waiting for the right mind to unravel it. Perhaps one day, someone will finally make sense of the symbols, revealing what Ricky tried to say before his life was cut short. Until then, his story lingers in the shadows, another cipher lost in time. The gruesome fate of Kenneka Jenkins. Kenneka Jenkins was a 19-year-old with a bright future ahead of her. She was known for her fun-loving nature and had a close relationship with her mother, Teresa Martin. On September 8, 2017, she went out with friends to a party at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Rosemont, Illinois. It was supposed to be a typical night of fun, music, and celebration. But by the early hours of the next morning, she had disappeared. The search for her led to a horrifying discovery, a tragedy that sparked public outcry, unanswered questions, and lingering suspicions about what really happened that night. The party took place in a ninth-floor hotel room, where young people gathered, drank, and socialized. Kenneka was seen having fun, but as the night progressed, she reportedly became intoxicated. Her friends later claimed that around 1:30 a.m., they left her briefly in the hallway while they retrieved her phone and belongings from the hotel room. When they returned, she was gone. After failing to find her, they called her mother, Teresa, at 4 a.m. Teresa, panicked, rushed to the hotel and begged the staff to check security footage or allow her to search the premises. But hotel employees insisted she needed to file a missing persons report first. Frustrated but determined, Teresa contacted the police, who eventually arrived later that morning. Hours passed before the hotel staff finally reviewed surveillance footage. What they found was disturbing. The footage showed Kenneka stumbling alone through the hallways, struggling to maintain balance, bumping into walls, and appearing confused. She wandered into restricted areas of the hotel, eventually making her way to the kitchen. However, there was no footage of her actually entering the freezer. Nearly 24 hours after she was last seen, Kenneka's body was found inside a walk-in freezer in an unused section of the kitchen. She was lying face down, her clothing slightly disheveled, her body frozen. The discovery was both tragic and deeply unsettling. The autopsy concluded that her death was caused by accidental hypothermia, with alcohol intoxication and a migraine medication as contributing factors. Authorities claimed that, in her impaired state, she wandered into the freezer and became trapped inside. But to many, this explanation didn't add up. One major question was why she couldn't escape. Walk-in freezers typically have safety mechanisms that allow people to exit from the inside. If she had entered on her own, why hadn't she been able to get out? Adding to the mystery was the missing footage. Why was there no video of her actually stepping into the freezer? Then there were the inconsistencies in her friends' accounts. Their reactions seemed delayed, and their stories changed in subtle ways. Did they know more than they were admitting? Why had they waited so long before calling her mother? As soon as details of Kenneka's death emerged, the internet exploded with theories. Some believed her friends had set her up, either as part of an argument or for something far more sinister. Others speculated that someone at the hotel, perhaps an employee or security personnel, had been involved in her death. Some even suggested human trafficking, citing rumors of illicit activity in the area. There was also criticism of how the case was handled. Kenneka had been missing for hours before anyone took her mother's concerns seriously. Had the search started sooner, could she have been saved? The fact that her body was discovered only after significant delays left many questioning whether something was being covered up. Her physical condition also raised concerns. Her clothes were slightly disheveled, and one shoe was off. Some experts argued this was due to hypothermia, as victims sometimes experience confusion and remove clothing, but others believed it suggested a struggle. Despite public outcry and protests, authorities stood by their conclusion. Kenneka's death was a tragic accident, but her mother and many others felt that too many questions remained unanswered. The haunting surveillance footage of Kenneka stumbling alone through the hotel that night remains etched in the minds of those who followed her case. Somewhere, perhaps in an overlooked detail, an unspoken confession, or a missing piece of footage, the real truth still lingers. Until then, her case remains one of the most chilling and debated mysteries of modern times.